Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Through Review 430, and today we're going to talk about Pandemic Legacy with complete spoilers. I'm going to reveal this box, you're not really going to see anything, but behind you is my board that is complete after 18 plays, and big flashing red lights here. This is 100% spoilers from my perspective. There's a couple of things I just tore up because I didn't unlock them, because I skipped through them. I don't know what those are. You can spoil them for me. I don't care in the comments, but feel free to leave, any spoilerific comments in this video, and people should be aware this is a spoiler safe environment. Okay. I did do a video just before this, obviously with no spoilers, but okay, you're not going to see that, but I will do some pictures. So I did take notes. I did 10 wins, 8 losses. So 18 games of this. I think there were 2 months where I didn't win a single game, and then I just went on to the next month. And I started off really good. I think I was like 4-1 or 4-5-1, and then I hit like the luck nailed me, and there was a couple, 2, 3 really close games where I should have won or could have won, and so my record was slightly better. I give this 10 out of 10. If you didn't watch my other video, this is my game of the year so far. I'd have a hard time replacing this because it was a super crazy experience. I'm going to sort of sum up from my other video, but maybe some people are watching this one directly. I played it 2 characters at a time, solo all the way through. That's how I was able to play it in a couple of weeks, 18 games in about 2 weeks. That's hard to do with a game group. And so I just did that, and I like Pandemic solo more than with people. So that's one of the few games I'd rather just, let me just play it and enjoy myself, in that time space. So I don't know how you pronounce this, but my CODA, how do you even pronounce this? My CODA 403D disease ended up being the red disease, which was in Asia. And if you see here, you can see I've got multiple roadblocks. Everything is now vaccinated, but a lot of the cities are rioting or collapsed or fallen. Seoul in South Korea was the patient 0, so this is where the little plastic men started to appear. And it was kind of interesting to see this area become really a hotspot. Now the funny thing is in the first game where this happened, it was sort of like, okay, I kind of was doing really well, cleaned up the other diseases, and I was about to just go and sort of sort out red. And then this triggered, I believe it was on the second epidemic card where this triggers, and then it was just like a landmine went off, and then I was slipping the red cards, and not only were they now, incurable because they hadn't quite converted to the, the little mutant glowing men yet, they were but now had become incurable. And it was like, okay, and then Asia just like, it was like exploded and this fell. There was like, fires and riots all happening. That was the first area where I really saw a lot of that. So right away, that's like your first like thematic hook. It's like, okay, this is spreading. There's these other diseases. People are getting sick. And then there's just like, boom, okay, something crazy when happened in Asia. And so again, stop the video now because I'm going to spoil everything right to the end at this point. Then you find out the government, is involved, and they're like, okay, who triggered it? And it was in South Korea. So I'm like, okay, so Kim Jong-un or somebody just triggered it, and they're behind this secret cabal. This is me just making this up. This isn't in the game. But it sort of fit thematically. It was like, okay, this guy went crazy, and he's a part of this secret government conspiracy or something. Really crazy, and just how that affects the game is like this weightedness on Asia, and like trying to get over there and sort of contain that, but you can't really cure it. You can get special cards and things to do that. But I thought it was really cool how it kind of juggled that, and then you only had to cure the 3 diseases and stuff like that. Made it very, very interesting. So I did use 5 characters. Now the character I named Joel, he was the medic. He lasted all the way through. He did end up with 2 scars. I got very careful about, folks getting scars, because then, if you get your 3rd scar, you've got to tear it up and then you get a new character on your next mission. I didn't have anybody, sort of die that way. I did have the trader mechanic come up and kick out my, I believe it was my quarantine person. And it seemed to me like the medic plus whoever was relevant to the current situation, like if it was the immunologist or the dispatcher, not the dispatcher, the researcher, I'm sorry, or the colonel. There were certain situations where the medic's just good at like kind of cleaning stuff up anyway, and then you kind of wanted that other person, at least in the 2-player game, to go through and take care of whatever special task might be coming out in terms of the legacy. That worked really well for me. I mean, I did lose 8 games, but I felt like like I said, there was like 3 that I really could have won. And I mentioned in the other video, you got to be careful of mistakes, I think, and sort of, I think the whole simplicity of Pandemic lends itself to this, because if you had a game that was too much more complex and you miss a rule or something, or because you start adding rules, you know, as you sort of sticker the board and unlock stuff, then you could see like, oh, I forgot to infect the city when I should have, you know, immediately and stuff like that. There was never anything that was like, I felt like the game was ruined ever, but that's something you want to be careful of, obviously. So one interesting thing about this, I'm just going to go through these notes here, is getting to sort of the whole spoiler aspect of it. I'll just talk quickly on this. Is when we do a video review, and even any kind of review, you kind of spoil the game if you talk too much strategy sometimes. And I kind of feel that. And this is a different kind of animal, but I feel like even if you talked about, I don't know, Game of Thrones, the board game, and you talked about the strategies and some of the different, like, you know, positions of the different houses that are on the board and the tactics of that, you are spoiling the game a little bit. And so it's an interesting thought that I thought of when talking about this, because I was actually going to originally just do a spoiler review, and then I was talking to my friend about it last night who hadn't played the game yet, and we weren't actually talking about this topic, but he was just asking me about the game, and I was very careful not to spoil anything for him because he didn't want it to be spoiled. And that's why I was like, okay, so I need to do the other review, and then I'll still do the spoiler one, because there's so much in here that's very neat when I'm going to get to these details that I want to talk about and analyze and sort of just discuss with people and have a back and forth, because I think it's cool. This is like, you know, I didn't play Risk Legacy, but this Pandemic Legacy is like, it's a next step kind of thing in terms of board gamings and everything. And it's yes, it's kind of like an RPG thing where you can unravel the story, but it's a different sort of animal. And I thought there was some cool stuff here. So the one thing that really sort of locked it in for me, and it was just like, the 100% like, okay, this is awesome, was if you look back at Asia there, that was completely just burnt down at the end of the game. And I had built all these roadblocks, and you develop the military bases and all that stuff. And then you get the sort of rug pulled out from underneath you, where it's like, okay, the government's behind it. Now you need to go back into this territory, search for the immunologist, and there's a crazy soldier, and you got to go find patient zero. And so you've made it more difficult now by roadblocking stuff and, you know, applying the vaccine because the military bases are there. So you've got to kind of like undo what you've done. You realize that you were a pawn in these folks' game, and now you've got to sort of like undo all the wrongs that you did sort of unknowingly. And that was like, you know, that's awesome. That's like, I can't put that into words. That sort of mystery. It's not just like, oh, the butler did it. It was like, oh, you did it, and you were helping these people, and it's a game, and so I was actively doing it. You know, so there's that whole philosophical thing. That was awesome, and I was like, thank you for that. You know, Matt and Rob Davio, Matt Leacock and Rob Davio. I was like, that's awesome. That's a great way to do that. And because at first I was like, oh, okay, the government did it, whoopity-doo. That's like, you know, okay, it's a board game, so I'm going to forgive it sort of the trite or, plot line. But then after you kind of developed a couple more steps, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to go into these places now, these places that I helped set up. I made the decision to take the advancement to put on the red sticker that locks in a permanent roadblock, which makes it much harder to travel. Yes, it blocks the diseases from going that direction in an outbreak, but I've screwed myself, so to speak. So it's just that extra consideration. That was like, this is beautiful. It's just like this perfect moment come together. So I thought that was really cool. And, you know, the whole idea of those tactics that you learn, and then you have to like unlearn, like you get the quarantine person who helps you with the quarantines. And so the balance again between the medic and the quarantine person and the roadblocks. And then you have the stickers on the cards. You can get the unfunded events. You can put on the military and the medical equipment. And then what that does is that adds just that extra layer of hand management, that decision making, where the cards are dual purpose, and you've got to really chew on and decide, you know, what to do with these. And the other thing is, once that disease, in my case it was red, becomes the evil disease that you can't cure using a normal action, those red cards are sort of worthless. I mean, you can still use them to travel around and stuff, but as those cities sort of fall and become impossible to get to, they also become worthless. Or not completely worthless, but just worth less. Do I stick those stickers, the unfunded events and the equipment, on those cards, or as you do the upgrades, you can make diseases easier to cure. So you can get things like you only need 4 cards to discard to cure it, or you can be anywhere. You don't have to be at a research facility to cure it. So do I put it on those cards that are a little bit easier to cure, so I don't need as many cards? So there's this, good decision-making process in terms of where to sort of sticker those cards and use that. That was really, really interesting way to do that. Oh, the relationship traits, sort of combined with the way that you sticker and do the events. The ones that I made good use of was the family relationship, and that was the one where you could do sort of the dispatcher or the researcher thing, where you could give it to somebody as long as one of you's in the town. You don't have to actually both be in the same town. I mean, that is a godsend, because you're like, oh, I just need one more blue card on this character. Well, if I move here, I can just ship it over to you. I mean, that was amazing. And then one of them turned out to be the traitor. I was like, no, because I'm like, I've been using that to such great effect. But then I saw the other one, which was the rival, which at first, it didn't dawn on me that that was a good one. But then when I had to make a new character to have a relationship, I was like, oh my gosh, I can see how this could be effective. So that's the one where if somebody plays or discards a card, you can discard 2 cards to snag that card. Well, you can do that with the events, like the one that lets you look at the next 6 cards in the deck and rearrange them in the affection deck. Well, you can just kind of recycle that back and forth a couple of times. Now, eventually you're going to run out of cards, so it's not an infinite loop thing, but you can use that, you can really abuse that and make a great combo of that. Or even like the event that lets you get 2 actions extra to the current character, bounce that back and forth, and become a really cool hand management game with that rivalry relationship, which is cool. And I really liked all of that. That was, and this is again where I get to the whole 10 out of 10 thing was, and I'm going to nitpick some stuff here, just but I was like mechanically, thematically, the whole unraveling, it just melded itself good. It was awesome. And so the next thing I wanted to talk about was, let's see here. Okay, so let's just nitpick some of the stuff. And these are mostly thematic, and I kind of talked about sort of the cliche of the government did it, and they kind of turned into zombies, glow-in-the-dark zombie people. They're not really zombies, but it kind of looks like zombies on the board. The other thing was, a lot of times I think there's 5 different searches that you have to go through, and you have to go like find the immunologist. Let's look through here. The virologist, search for the stockpile, search for the immunologist, search for the paranoid soldier, and then search for patient 0. So that was like 5 searches that you had to do, and you had to discard cards and be in certain areas and discard certain color cards to do that, usually in the fallen area. And that got a little bit old. I will have to say that. That got a little bit old. It got a little bit frustrating. And one of the things with pandemic, and it kind of goes with most co-ops, is like, I'd be like 1 space away from discovering somebody. I think this happened twice. I was like 1 or 2 spaces, and then you'd pull the epidemic card, and then it would go to a cold trail, and you'd just be like, and say the F word. And I was like, oh, it's so close. And, but in the same side of my mouth or the other side of my mouth, that's kind of cool, because then it's just, you don't want to win every game either. So that's interesting. And I think it's balanced. Let's just tack for a minute. It's balanced perfectly. Like I said, it was 10-8, so I had a little bit more wins than losses. But enough losses that I felt the losses. I had a couple times where I was 2 losses in a row. And in December, I almost won in the first month of December. I got the stockpile, got that, and I was because I've been screwed so many times on searching for stuff. I just went for that. And I was down to, you have to of course vaccinate every last city that was one, the infected, with the green glowing people cities. I was down to, I set it up perfectly. I loved it. It was going to be so cinematic ending, but the game, I got the last outbreak before I could do it. And I'd sent my immunologist into Taipei. It was a fallen city. I discarded the red cards to get in there because it was fallen. And then they were in there. They had 3 of the figures on there. So they're going to start their turn and get a scar. So they're going to like sacrifice themselves. It was going to be their first scar. But then I had the pills, the vaccinations to, clear everybody, because they can do it all for 1 action. If they're on the spot, they can clear them, and then they can do the actual vaccinating of the city after that. So easy, just 2 actions. I just needed to make it to the next turn. He was going to get the scar. He's going to just go in there like a hero, and then boom, in Kinisha. How do you spell that? Kinshasa or something in Africa, the yellow fever broke out, and that was the last outbreak. And I was like, oh, so all I needed to do in the next game was literally just vaccinate one city. And I got the perfect deal of cards, and it was like, I think it was like on the first turn, because I had the +2 actions. So it was like, okay, that was, why did I even set that up? But it was great. If that would have happened, it would have been beautiful, but it was also kind of beautiful that it failed at the same time. So I will say, the adjacency stuff, where you can do something in a space that's adjacent to you, I mean, that is unreal. I mean, because you can just sort of blow by a city, cure stuff, you know, do the vaccination stuff next door, and the quarantine person obviously just kind of setting quarantines everywhere. That kind of stuff where you don't have to be in the spot where you actually need to do the thing is just amazing. Let's see. Let's see here. Sorry about this. Okay, one thing I was interested, I'm curious what Team Bravo is. Because if you see here, I had to figure out which card actually mentioned it. I was like, no card mentions this, because you actually lose points when you do your score at the end of the game if you had to use them. And I'm like, did I miss a rule? So I dug through and I was like, I bet they came out here. So I scratched off just a little bit and I said, okay, Team Bravo. So I'm curious what that does. I'm not going to scratch it off just because I didn't use it. I thought that was kind of interesting what that actually is. So if somebody wants to comment what that is, that's fine. I should talk about the number 8 box. I did actually open that because I was very curious. There's a little errata sheet that says, sticker this. If you lose 4 games in a row, open this box. I never did, but I was like, I have to open that and see what happens. And it's a couple of these free events in this case, where you can just, I believe, ignore an epidemic card. So that's kind of cool that you can, those are huge, that you could do that if you really just had a string of bad luck. And I could see, you know, good players, pandemic players, it's feasible to lose 4 games in a row of this, because it's slightly easier, you know, than most co-ops. I mean, decently easier, but you can get screwed by the card. You know, getting just back to the sort of main point that I have is that whole arc of you sort of undoing what you've done already. And I thought that was very, very strong, very powerful. And I really am of 2 minds. I'm stronger, I'm more of a positive mind. Let's say 75 positive, 25 negative on the legacy stuff. Because I can't play this anymore. There's no way I could play this copy of the game. I could go get another copy, play a friend's copy, and I would be happy to do that. I won't buy a copy myself. But I would go play a friend's copy if there's like, hey, we want a player to jump in. You know, I would keep my mouth shut. I wouldn't spoil anything unless they wanted me to, you know, to think strategy, because there is stuff that you want to do, you know, long term. There is a decent amount of that where, you know, when you take your upgrades, for example, you're like, well, I need to have 6 military bases. Well, why don't I put 2 starting military bases in these 2 different regions where I created them? Because then I'm like 80% or 90% of the way to my goal that I need to do for the next thing, so I don't have to worry about that. I can go plop a military base and then worry about curing the other diseases, or treating the diseases anyway. I can't play it though, is the point. And I don't have a desire to. And it's not the end of the world. I played it 18 times. And because I enjoy this game solo, and kind of because I want to do videos on it, I whipped it out in 2 weeks. Now, if you were a normal person, you would play probably, well, the least you would play would be 12 to 24 games. And if you played, let's say, 3 games a week, you really pressed it. You know, you had a weekly game group, you played 3 games a week, which would take you probably 3 hours to do 3 games, maybe a little bit less. 3 divided by 24 would be 8 weeks, or down to 12. You know, good luck winning 12 games in a row, honestly, but you know, that'd be 4 weeks. So it'd take you probably 2 or 3 months to go through it. That is totally your money's worth, 100% your money's worth for this game, because it's a $50 or $60 game, I think, online. And so if you got, you know, a couple of months of pleasure out of it, I mean, no question. So it'd be kind of cool if it let you keep playing, like I believe Risk Legacy does. You could just keep playing that world as it is at the end. You just have like your own custom version of Risk. This is not that. The game ends, in my opinion. I don't see how you can play it, because there's no reason you couldn't just set up and play Pandemic. I mean, and just ignore all the stuff on the board, or pick and choose like modules or something. You could like say, hey, we're gonna do Pandemic, and say the virologist is lost or something, and that's why it got out. Somebody kidnapped the virologist. You know, you could do stuff like that. There's no reason, nothing stopping you from doing that. But on the 75% positive side, I would love to see this story element pushed, where you do have a beginning, a middle, and end, that arc. I could see so many applications to this. And I would caution people to jump into this too haphazardly. And I think a lot of this is dealing with specifically Pandemic is a simple system. It's streamlined, it works well, it's proven, and it's been baked and play tested I don't know how many times before it came out, and obviously play tested tens of thousands of times, I mean, by just regular gamers and stuff. So it's proven, it's been beaten. It's like the #1 people's choice, right? On the Dice Tower thing. So that says a lot. And it's one of the most voted on games on Board Game Geek. And so it's proven. So you've got that sort of to attach to it. I think a new system, it would be tricky. And like, Seafall's coming out, I believe, next year. And that's a brand new system. So the system itself isn't proven necessarily. I mean, I have faith that it'll be a decent game at least. But you don't have that proven stuff. So it'll be tricky to sort of apply this to something. I'd love to see Game of Thrones Legacy, or Robinson Crusoe Legacy, or Clash of Cultures Legacy. I'm just going to name stuff. I'd love to see Civilization Legacy, which Rob Davio is working on over multiple games. I believe like 5 different games. Like each game will be a legacy game, and then it's just basically expansions, but it's a Civilization game over time. I mean, I could see many co-ops as perfect. And I said this in the first review. When I heard Pandemic Legacy, I think myself and others were like, oh, that's perfect. That's perfect because it's simple, and you can just sticker up the board. It's got a perfect map. You can see the physical changes and all that stuff. Anyway, so the other thing that I think is important here to be careful of, if you were to make a legacy game, I'm having a hard time with the words here. You want to be careful with like the story that you're telling. I think that has to cook and bake for a while. And I don't know how long it took them to sort of come up with a plot line for this, where it's like, okay, they take some of the tropes and stuff, which you kind of would expect. It's like, okay, there's diseases, the government's behind it, diseases, zombie-like stuff, military sort of quarantining, setting up roadblocks, and sort of evolving that from sort of the pop culture of post-apocalyptic zombie-ish, plague-ish kind of stuff. So they had that to sort of pull from. But I'd like to also see this like pushed and like go into sort of like more personal space, maybe. Like you would have a story with just a group of people, which you do have here because you're sort of like this little band of folks that are sort of, revolt and rebel and sabotage and all that kind of stuff. But it would be interesting to see something that was a little bit less global in scope. Maybe it could be post-apocalyptic, but it would just take place in your little small town or something. Stuff like that. I mean, you could really go after it. Because think about it. Pandemic Legacy, whole world. Risk Legacy, whole world. Seafall, Legacy, whole world. That new Civilization thing, whole world. Like, it's always the whole world. It would be cool to see explore this, or even be like a human body. Like, just be like, okay, we're all working together. We're like the different impulses of the human being that we're controlling. Not to get too nutty, but like the principalities and like the devil and the angel on this person's shoulders, like sort of convincing them to go a certain. I mean, you could really do something crazy like that, and I think you could do it really well. I mean, maybe that's like 20 years down the road or something for somebody to really, sort of build up this lexicon of game mechanics and stuff. Anyway, so I recommend this, and this is why it gets 10 out of 10, is because it just hits all of those cylinders that games don't really hit. And I'm really getting sick of myself talking right now, but I just want to kind of stress that, and I just invite people to comment and discuss, because I played this solo, and and I'm just talking to this machine right now. But I think it's very interesting to have a dialogue about this, and that's why I wanted to create a complete spoiler review, is because I think there's stuff here that is just like on the tip of my tongue, because I just finished this game yesterday, and it's just like, this sort of overstimulated a little bit by the game. But I think there's a lot to discuss with what Legacy can be, and all these things like that, and the good and the bad parts about it, and not so much of it from a point of view of a product or an artifact. I mean, that happens, and that's part of why it's there, but not so much of like, let's whine about how I can't play this a million times forever. I mean, come on. But beyond that, there's the interesting parts of Legacy and what that means in that whole system, and why I think it should be an important touchstone in gaming. And I don't want to see a billion Legacy games come out, but you know, if they're like this, then I think we should see a few more. Okay, thank you everybody. Please comment and spoil away, because this is the spoiler safe zone.